What happens when a mad emperor tries to bring back his dead wife by turning a young boy into her? This isn't fiction. This is ancient Roman. This is the story of Sporus, a child, a slave, a boy chosen by Nero for something unthinkable. After the sudden death of his pregnant wife, Emperor Nero didn't grieve like most people. He didn't move on. He looked for a replacement, someone who looked like her, moved like her, and when he found that someone, it wasn't a woman at all. It was a boy in this video. You'll uncover the shocking truth behind one of history's darkest obsessions. You'll learn who Sporus was, what Nero did to him, and why this story still haunts historians to this day. We, LL, explored public weddings, forced rituals, lost identity, and how love, when twisted by power, turns into horror. This is one of those stories that makes you question how far madness can go when no one dares to say no. So watch till the end, because this tale only gets darker. Welcome to history. Screen if you love true stories that the world forgot. Hit that subscribe button and join us for more. Nero became emperor when he was just 17. He ruled one of the greatest empires in history, but power came too early and corrupted him fast. At first, he was seen as charming, artistic, even reasonable. But soon things changed. His mother tried to control him. His advisors fought for influence. And Nero, young, angry, and proud, learned how to get rid of anyone who stood in his way. Then came Poppy. Sabinici was beautiful, clever, and ambitious. Nero fell for her deeply. Some say he even killed his first wife and his own mother just to be with Poppy, as she became his empress. And for a time, Nero seemed happy. But Poppy was pregnant when tragedy struck. One night during an argument, Nero kicked her in a fit of rage. She died from the blow. The child died too. That moment shattered something inside him. Nero was consumed by guilt, but not the kind that leads to change. This was darker, twisted grief. He couldn't let Poppy go. He obsessed over her memory, her beauty, her presence. He wanted her back, but she was gone. So he searched, not for comfort, but for a replacement. Someone he could mold, control, transform. That's when he found Sporus. Who was Sporus? In the shadow corridors of Rome's imperial palace, among marble columns and blood-soaked ambition, lived a boy known by a nickname Sporus. The name meant seed, a cruel and almost symbolic branding for a child thrust into the ruthless theater of power. He was a slave, young, beautiful, voiceless. History does not record his real name nor his desires. Only his appearance survived the centuries, filtered through the gaze of those who saw him not as a person, but as a possession. Caught the eye of Nero, the emperor whose name would become synonymous with cruelty and madness. Historians spoke of Sporus in hushed and unsettling tones, describing his delicate features and haunting resemblance to Nero's late wife Poppaea. That eerie similarity would become Sporus' fate. There is no evidence that Sporus had any say in what followed. The records are silent on his voice, but loud with the proclamations of power. Nero had him castrated. The boy was dressed in imperial silks, given the title of empress, and paraded as Nero's wife before the Roman elite. To the emperor, it was spectacle. To the Senate, perhaps a scandal. But to Sporus, it was something else entirely. He was a boy dragged into a twisted echo of imperial mourning, a living shadow of someone else's grief. Behind the opulence and ceremony lay a devastating truth. Sporus was a child forced into a role he could neither choose nor escape. His beauty, admired by chroniclers, became both his curse and his cage, and still through the ages, he remains a figure wrapped in tragedy. Not for the power he wielded, he had none, but for the innocence devoured by a throne that demanded spectacle. Above all else, it began with an order. Nero, emperor of Rome, the self-proclaimed god on earth, made a decision that would alter one boy's fate forever. Sporus, still barely more than a child, was selected, chosen not for merit or favor, but for the cruel resemblance he bore to Nero's beloved wife, Poppaea, who had died under mysterious and violent circumstances. The emperor, consumed by grief and megalomania, didn't seek to mourn her, he sought to remake her. And so he commanded the unthinkable. Sporus was castrated, a brutal, irreversible ritual. There was no ceremony to it, only pain, silence, and obedience. The act was not hidden, but known, whispered through Rome's corridors, a grotesque merging of personal grief and public authority. It was not simply the mutilation of a body. It was the erasure of a life that might have been. Then came the transformation. Nero declared Sporus free, yet bound him in a new way. The boy was given a new name, new garments, and a new role, Empress of Rome, draped in a bridal veil adorned in jewels. Sporus was led through a public wedding ceremony complete with dowry, incense, chants, and ritual offerings. The people watched stunned or silent as their emperor married a boy he had reshaped to resemble the woman he'd lost. This was not love, it was resurrection. Through illusion, Sporus was no longer himself if he ever had been. He had become a reflection, a placeholder in a grief-stricken emperor's fantasy. A body-turned symbol, a child handed silks, and a title in place of agency, the psychological weight of the role crushed any fragments of boyhood left in him. For Nero, it was a spectacle. For Sporus, it was a kind of death, one that kept breathing in. The imperial court spectacle often masked suffering. Sporus, now adorned in the robes of an empress, moved through Nero's palace like a living ghost dressed in silks dyed with Tyrian purple. Veiled as a bride, he played his assigned role beside the emperor who claimed to love him. But this was not love. It was theater macabre and public. Nero paraded him through Rome, appearing as the grieving husband who had restored his loss. Poppy, a boy, however, remained silent among Nero's many disturbing gestures. One stood out: a gift, a ring, ancient gold cold. It bore the image of the rape of Proserpina, the Roman myth of a young girl stolen by the god of the underworld, dragged into darkness against her will. A symbol of abduction, of captivity, cloaked in ritual. Sporus wore it. Perhaps he understood its meaning. Perhaps he had no choice. To the spectators, this twisted pageant may have seemed like mourning. To Nero, perhaps it was ritualistic penance. But beneath the lavish ceremonies and staged affection was something far darker: a man weaponizing grief, turning pain into performance. He didn't simply grieve. Poppy tried to resurrect her by reimagining a child's body into her image. The rituals, the costumes, the bridal ceremonies, they weren't acts of devotion. They were acts of domination. Sporus became a symbol not just of Nero's despair, but of how power distorts mourning into possession. Every veil he wore, every ring he bore, whispered a silent truth that he was not seen for who he was, but only for who he resembled: a boy draped in the echoes of a dead woman used to soothe the emperor's haunted mind. Death of Nero did not bring freedom when the emperor's reign collapsed in blood and betrayal. Sporus, now a young man, was not released from the role that had been forced upon him. Instead, he became a prize, a possession passed between the hands of those vying for control in Rome's chaotic power vacuum. He was no longer just a symbol of Nero's obsession. He became a living relic of imperial scandal, something to flaunt, to own. Nymphidius Sabinus, the Praetorian prefect who briefly held power, seized Sporus and continued the charade. He treated Sporus as his wife, parading him in public, using his presence as a grotesque reminder of the intimate ties he claimed to the former emperor. It was not affection. It was branding, a calculated move to show Rome that he held Nero's legacy in his grasp, even if only through the boy the emperor had broken. After Nymphidius fell, Sporus passed briefly into the hands of Otho, yet another fleeting figure in Rome's parade of short-lived rulers. Each saw Sporus not as a person, but as a tool and artifact of imperial drama. None asked what he wanted. Then came Vitellius, and like those before him, Vitellius made no pretense of affection. He planned to humiliate Sporus, publicly forcing him to take part in a theatrical reenactment of a myth, perhaps the very story carved into that old ring, the abduction of Proserpina. But this time it wouldn't be symbolic. It would be cruel live. And final, faced with the unbearable weight of what lay ahead, Sporus made his final choice. In the year 69 AD, he ended his life. No rebellion, no outcry, just silence, the only act of agency left to him in a world that had never allowed him a voice. Sporus's story is not just a tragedy, it's a study in power, identity, and the brutal limits of control. His body became a battleground for an emperor's grief, a mirror for lost love, and a tool of political theater, the forced castration, the renaming, the ceremonial marriage. Each act was more than just violence. It was domination made intimate, and erasure not only of autonomy, but of identity itself. In Roman society, eunuchs were not entirely foreign. Castration existed, though often reserved for servants, entertainers, or exoticized outsiders. But Nero's actions pushed beyond the accepted margins. He didn't merely exploit an existing social class, he weaponized the idea of gender itself. He crafted a persona onto Sporus, sculpting him into an empress to soothe his personal grief and assert his unchecked will over both body and meaning. It wasn't scandalous just for what it was. It was scandalous because of who had done it and how public it became. Sporus was denied a stable identity. His name was stripped, his role forced, his voice silenced. In that erasure, we see something disturbingly timeless, how the grief of the powerful, when untempered by accountability, can become cruelty, mourning twisted into performance, love transfigured into possession. These echoes still resonate. Sporus' story speaks not only of ancient Rome, but of a recurring human impulse to reshape others in the image of our own pain, to override autonomy with desire to make symbols out of living people. It's a reminder of what happens when a single person's sorrow is allowed to swallow the dignity of another. Behind the grandeur of the empire lies a quieter, more intimate horror, the kind that doesn't burn cities but quietly erases lives from the inside out. Sporus' story is not just a footnote in Nero's twisted legacy. It is a chilling reminder of what happens when grief turns into control and love becomes a weapon. His life, stripped of agency and rewritten to fit the fantasies of an emperor, reveals how power can distort mourning into something monstrous. He was not a lover, not a consort, not an empress, was a boy robbed of identity, voice, and ultimately the will to live. His tragedy lives in the shadows of Roman history, but its echoes are painfully human. The need to possess what we've lost, the urge to reshape others in our grief, the silence that follows when someone is turned into a symbol instead of a soul. If this story moved you, if these forgotten lives buried beneath empires matter to you, help us keep telling them. Like this video, share it with someone who loves untold history, and subscribe to History Screen for more dark, haunting tales from the past. Behind every grand empire, there's a story they tried to erase.